Trenches. I'm Dr. Amy Alamar, and with me today we have Donna Palomba from Jane Doe No More, the founder of Jane Doe No More. Welcome.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you, and we're going to be talking about sexual assault and how to talk with your kids about sexual assault. Parenting from the Trenches is a show to reach you and your families and help you understand what's going on in the world and kind of digest it for your family. So we're hoping to get your comments, and we're very curious to know who you are and where you're tuning in from. So please join us in the conversation online on Facebook and Instagram. You can also direct message us. We're at Yellowbrick.me. So thank you for joining us today. And it's a topic that has been in the news now for quite some time. We're seeing a lot of high-profile men being accused of sexual assault, sexual harassment as well. And just this morning, Matt Lauer, and it was sobering to see the reactions, because here's somebody who's quite beloved in his industry, and even his co-host was, moved nearly to tears talking about this and sort of reconciling what it is to have worked with somebody and to know them in one way and then to find out this information about them. So very timely topic for
Absolutely.
us today. So thank you for joining us.
Certainly.
Do you want to talk a little bit, just very briefly describe to us what Jane Doe No More is?
Sure. Jane Doe No More is a not-for-profit organization, and we are all about improving the way society responds to victims of sexual violence, any type of sexual violence. It could be child sexual abuse, sexual assault, or rape. And so what sets us apart at Jane Doe No More is that we make it personal because we are survivors ourselves.
Yeah. And I've even seen some of your survivors speak, which has been a very moving experience. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank
and what is your website?
It's janedoenomore.org.
Great. So people can go there for more information
Absolutely.
on that.
We have
Wonderful.
a lot of information.
So, we're bombarded with this. Let's start just by defining, if you're comfortable, sexual assault, sexual harassment, because we can lump them together, and there's been a lot of both in the news.
Sure.
If you want to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So sexual assault is any unwanted touch or an action against your will. And it doesn't even have to be a touch per se, because it could be someone doing something themselves that you are uncomfortable with, exposing themselves, for example.
Sure.
So that's a type of an assault on someone else. And then harassment is really kind of bullying in a sexual manner, I would say. Like telling someone, I have some really good connections. If you want to, why don't we go to lunch?
So an abuse of power.
Yes.
Really using your power to control somebody in a sexual manner. Okay.
And you hit on it, Amy. It's truly, all of these crimes are one of someone using their power and control to make someone else uncomfortable against their will, without consent.
So it's so much more than the sexual act or the intimacy of it.
It's so true.
It's so much more than that.
Yes.
And our show is for parents and talking to their kids about sometimes very hard topics. Yes. How do you recommend starting the conversation? You touched on it's any unwanted touch or even non-touch that makes you uncomfortable. So I know when I bring my kids to the pediatrician, oftentimes it sort of sobers me to hear them say, nobody's allowed to touch you. I'm a doctor. We're going to look at your body.
Yes.
But could it start there? Should it start there? What is the best way to start this conversation?
I think the most important thing is to start the conversation and to start it early.
Okay.
I don't think a child is ever too young to open up a line of communication and let them know that they need to respect themselves and they need to respect others.
Yeah.
And no one should do something to them that makes them feel uncomfortable. And then you could just flat out ask them, has anyone done anything to you to make you feel uncomfortable? And listen, wait for a sign or something that might be a little bit different, or if they're acting a little differently, pursue that. But also let them know, as you said, that no one should have the right to touch them on their private parts, where the bathing suit is. Often they'll use that as an example for a younger child. And to know that the only people that can touch you there are mommy and daddy when you're bathing, or a doctor when mommy or daddy is present. So to kind of set it up so that they can, in terms that they understand.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that almost starting that culture of consent, and I've talked with a few people in the field and talking about, really understanding what the word consent means. It's not just
Yes.
respect. Respect's a great word, and it's
Right.
great to have a world of respect, but it's really about consent and what do I allow and what am I comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.
And setting boundaries,
And,
you
and
know?
listening for consent. Like, how do I know?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's often difficult to verbalize that. You know, you may be, you know, as a child gets older, they may feel a little bit awkward. You know, they go through these different stages. So building up your child's self-esteem is so important. Having them have the confidence to be able to say, no, that I don't like that, or I don't want to do that. And never forcing them into, you know, giving someone a hug, or, you know, even if it's a family member, if they're uncomfortable, kind of letting them know that it's in their right to choose what they do when it comes to that type of.
And who to go to.
Right.
Right? So, all right, something's happening or I'm uncomfortable.
Yes.
Now what? Because they won't always go to mom or dad.
That's so true. And so it's important for them to know that they need to tell someone, and it should be a trusted adult. So if it's someone that your sister, for example, that if they're uncomfortable coming to you, for example, they can go to their aunt.
Yeah.
If you know that this is, you know, someone that is a trusted individual.
And I think that, you know, in our family, we've sort of made that clear from the start. And the number is right by the phone. Of course, we still have a landline, but also on the cell phones now. You know, and reminding them through the years, who's your go-to person? And they actually have a few. There's a man and a woman on their list, because
That's
you don't
wonderful.
know. And I think just making sure that that person knows that they're the go-to person, so they have a little
Yes.
responsibility, right? You know, like, my kid can call you.
Right.
And it's okay, and you don't have to tell me, you know, or please do tell me if that's your comfort level. But, you know, kind of letting them know, too, that they're the go-to.
Absolutely. It's giving them resources so that they feel comfortable in an uncomfortable situation of who to go to.
Yeah.
It's so important to make that clear.
Now, you've talked about, and I think you're right, it's never too young to start the conversation. It should be early and often. I agree with you. But what if you haven't started that conversation? You know,
Right.
you don't want to penalize somebody who hasn't known to do this yet or
Absolutely.
hasn't been comfortable. So what are good ways to start the conversation with a tween or a teen?
Sure.
You know, if you just feel like now I got to do it. I got to jump in.
Right.
Are there any tips?
Well, I would think to use the landscape that's happening right now.
Use the news.
The news.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Every day, it seems. And, of course, Matt Lauer this morning, we heard, was just fired from NBC.
Right.
So, you know, I think that's a great conversation starter.
Yeah,
you know,
you're
to your
right. And they're
child.
probably seeing this. You know, some people say, oh, my kids don't watch the news, or I don't, you know, and I encourage them, well, you should talk about it even on the surface level, because they're probably seeing things on their social media that they don't know how to process. So even if they're not reading, you know, a newspaper online, or
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not watching, you know, a news station, they're probably seeing things through their feeds.
Absolutely.
Right?
Through
And so
Facebook or
referencing
Twitter.
it is important. Yeah.
Absolutely. And,
Okay,
and
so
then,
using that as a jumping off point, and just maybe using your own shock value, or, oh, I saw this coming, or,
Right.
you know, wherever you come from in that spectrum.
Yes. And I think that opens up the conversation that it could be someone who is very talented and very accomplished and
likable.
has done wonderful things,
Yeah.
but it doesn't preclude that person from also behaving badly.
Yeah, yeah.
And they need to be held accountable because that behavior
That's
is
something that I feel like we're still figuring out. You know, it's like we're still dealing as a, you know, kind of society right now in shock mode, because there have been so many allegations. And it's interesting because this has obviously been going on probably since the start of time, but certainly for decades we've had, you know,
Right.
evidence that this has been going on.
Right.
Why now is there so much, or have there been other times in history where there have been these sort of like surges of accusations? You know, is this really a turning moment? And will things change? And you don't know. You don't have a crystal ball. But what do you think?
But I do think, Amy, that it is different now. I mean, I could liken back to, the early 90s with Anita Hill.
Yeah, yeah.
And how that poor thing was all alone. And Clarence
And he
Thomas,
still got appointed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That would not happen today.
That would not happen.
I think,
You
know,
think it
it
would
started,
not happen
the
today.
Sandusky case, the Bill Cosby. And, you know, now Weinstein, of course, this watershed that's happening. And now every day in the news, we're hearing more
And it's
more.
really across, you know, sectors. So it's like politics, Hollywood, you know, media.
Right.
So it's not, you know, isolated. I
No,
think
it's
if it were
different verticals.
isolated to one area, you know, it would be, Oh, and we've seen a lot on Silicon Valley, not
Right.
direct allegations in this surge, but we've seen a lot of like this sort of hostile work environment, some reports on that. So, it's really reaching every
It
sector.
is. And the commonality, though, is the power.
Yeah.
You know, in their field and how they use that in an inappropriate
And what
way.
an interesting conversation to have with your kids, on that kind of level, taking
Exactly.
it away from, the sexual assault and talking really just about assault and power and,
Right.
Business and how this
Right.
affects them.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And to also trust their gut. We have a sense, all of us do.
Yeah.
And to understand that if you're not feeling right about something, you're usually spot on.
Right.
And you need to trust that and figure out what's going on.
Okay, so you're starting young and you're talking often with your young kids if you're a parent of a young, child.
Yes.
And now if you haven't started, you have some tips on how to start with a tween or a teen.
Yep.
What if, yikes, your child comes to you and says, I think I've been assaulted.
Right.
What is your next step?
Well,
Or what if you think they're being assaulted?
Right. Well, I think then you open up the conversation about, you've been kind of quiet. Is everything okay? And, you know that you can come to me with absolutely anything, and that I will always believe you, and I'm here for you. And you kind of ask if has anything happened recently, or has anyone done anything to you that maybe you felt uncomfortable with, and then let it be and listen. And if they don't want to come forward right then, perhaps they need time to process it and maybe strike up a conversation a little bit later. So have lots of little conversations.
I would imagine as a parent, you need some resources. So obviously Jane Doe No More would be a great one. You would think. So, but wherever you live in the country or internationally, would you recommend? I mean, I would think I would need to lean on somebody because I don't have all the answers and it is my kid and I might, not know what to do next.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of different resources.
Would you encourage law enforcement or a nonprofit doing work in the area? What do you think?
Right. I think there's definitely crisis organizations in the area that offer free services that you could certainly give them a call.
So seek out one of them.
Seek them out.
And do you help at Jane Doe No More if somebody calls you from another area? Do you have some connections where you can at least point them in the right direction?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Because
there's
crisis
one
organizations
resource they can
everywhere.
go to. Okay.
Right. And then, of course, online now, there's so much.
Yeah, but you don't know, right?
Right.
I'd
want
to go to a trusted
source.
place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, you said something that I'm going to push back just a little on.
Sure.
You said, I'm going to believe you no matter what. I wonder, like if my child comes to me, if it's more important than I believe you, then I'm here for you. You can come to me with anything. I trust you. I'll stand by you. Because sometimes we don't know. We don't know what kids are saying.
We don't.
Do we believe them?
But
no
when
holds
it comes to something as personal and as intimate as a sexual assault, it's interesting because a lot of intelligent people, well-respected and well-meaning people have said to me, because of what I do, I just don't understand if these women, if they did nothing wrong, why did it take 20 years to come forward? And I think it's because of the stigmas that are associated with this crime.
Yes.
It is very rare that someone will make up an allegation
So
like
false
that.
accusations are very rare. And that's something really important for our viewers to understand.
It is. It is. And unfortunately, I think that now it's changing and I'm so grateful, but unfortunately a lot of victims came forward before and they were asked things that made them feel like they were to blame.
Yeah. So that's an interesting statistic to frame the conversation, right? That false accusations are rare.
Right.
Do you have other points of reference that are good to frame that conversation?
I just think that it's important when we have a conversation that we do not ask, in questions that may be accusatory, like, well, why did you go there with him? If your child, for example, if your teen is saying, well, I went to this party and this guy came up to me. Well, why'd you go to that party? I told you that, you don't want to.
Why'd you dress that way?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things will shut down.
shut down the
someone.
kid,
And
or
the conversation,
the survivor.
absolutely.
Yes, that's a great point. So really standing by your kid and teaching them to stand by others should they see something happening.
Absolutely. The whole thing about being an active bystander, we need to take care of each other. As we can see in the news, so many victims are coming forward, and often these things happen when they are in the company of others, and it could have been prevented. So we want to do everything that we can to prevent it from happening in the first place, to stop it before.
So prevention is
escalates.
key. However, dealing with it and dealing with fallout is super important right now.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And one of the things we do at Jane Doe No More is we offer self-defense classes for women and girls.
Yes.
Girls
The
12
Escape
years
Alive.
old. Escape Alive survival skills.
Yeah.
And we've trained over 4,500 women and girls. And it's about, empowerment. It's about, having that confidence to know how to get out of a tough situation.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about, talking with boys specifically, okay? So, first of all, we know girls and boys, men and women can be victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. So, we'll get that out there. We understand this is true. It seems it's more, prominent with women being, victims. So, okay, how do we talk to boys and young men, right, about this issue? I know that I have 2 sons at home, and, most men are not aggressive. So how do we start that conversation? Do you have tips for that?
I think that it's important for all of us, and including our boys, to know that most men don't rape.
Yeah.
I mean, however, the bad guys, the core offenders, they will rape an average of 6 times each. So, I mean, we need to, find them and get them off the street. So I think that, as a young teen, as a young male teen, they have an opportunity to be a role model, to kind of set that tone with their buddies or with their girls that are friends of theirs as well, about how, we all, have boundaries, and we can respect one another. And that, consent is something that is so important and needs to be discussed. And I know that it's a topic that's a little difficult, like, oh, can I hold your hand now? Or can I, it can be a little awkward.
But better
to
safe than sorry.
That, yes, and find a way to communicate.
And that's all about building relationships. Because if you just talk about an intimate friendship, right?
Yes.
There are boundaries in the beginning, and then as you get closer, you kind of make assumptions about each other. But you're also close enough to be able to share, hopefully, that made me uncomfortable. So that's all the same in developing an intimate romantic relationship.
It's so true. And I worry today about the younger ones, because they're not used to talking as much.
Yes, they do.
They're communicating via text.
Yes, interpersonal skills are definitely different now from how they
different.
were. And I also worry, I think young men should know that they are allowed to have the expectation of a good relationship and, love and trust, that it's not just all about them being perpetrators and, going off for one thing only in a relationship, that they should also expect these things out of a relationship. And that conversation, really needs to change, because I don't think there's enough of that support out there from what I've seen.
It's true.
Yeah.
And especially now.
My research is limited, to be honest, in this area, but I've done some, and it just seems that, we condition, I know more about like the male-female conditioning, right, research. And so it's like we condition males, like, don't cry.
Yeah.
Right? Boys don't cry.
Right.
But if we have them repressing their feelings and they, it's hard for them. They don't understand how to develop those relationships.
No, it's very true. There's an exercise called a man box. It's like, what do you think of when you think of a man? He's strong and he's powerful and he's aggressive. And do you think of a man as emotional? And they obviously should be all of these things. So
yes.
to
Just
kind
like
of
a woman
down
should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To be more open about our feelings, to be able to express them. And to know, with all this news of sexual predators, it's good to have you can have a healthy sexual relationship. It's not that sex is bad. It's that rape and sexual assault is
that's
bad.
Very important, right?
Yes.
Like the difference between sex and sexual assault. So like when you have the sex talk with your kids, it's very different from the sexual assault talk.
Exactly.
Right? Like this is violent, this is aggression, and so we it might be part of the same conversation. You might have it at the same time, because right now they are very linked in our minds.
Yeah.
However, we want to be really clear in the conversation that these are 2 different concepts.
That's so true. And it may not necessarily necessarily be violent, but it could still be an assault as well.
Yeah.
And what's confusing with children is it could actually make them feel good if they're being assaulted. So there's that confusion, like, well, I don't know what he's doing, but so
there could be some
again,
sexual pleasure involved,
yes.
and then that creates
So-
probably some shame or
and some confusion. How do you process
Not sure if
that?
it's assault or not.
Exactly.
That's a
And
great point
that's
that I had not
why
heard.
We need to open up that communication to be able to talk it through.
Interesting. And also it's so deep if it's somebody you know and trust, if it's like a family friend or a family member, it's so much more complicated.
I have to tell you, Amy, we have 46 survivors now that have gone through our Survivor Speak program, and that includes 4 men, but most of them are victims of child sexual abuse, often starting at the age of 3, 4, and 5 years old.
Really interesting.
And all of them by someone that they know.
Wow.
And often in the home.
Yeah.
It could be a stepfather, it could be an uncle.
Yeah, so just being really on the lookout.
Absolutely. And again, it's ugly to talk
But
about.
not panicking, but
No.
looking for red flags, having that
Absolutely.
relationship with your child, starting the conversation early, as opposed to assuming something is wrong.
That's so true.
Yeah,
That's so important.
Well, this is a time in our show where we go to our audience questions. So I'd love your help in addressing them. We
I'd love
have
to.
2 on the topic. So one of them is, I'm afraid that talking about sexual abuse with my kids will scare them. And I know in previous conversations we've talked about that with, suicide prevention and awareness, that people were afraid to talk about suicide because it might kind of, ignite that idea. But we were told, no, talking about it helps. It helps kids process. It's not like talking about it makes them, think they're being assaulted or
Right.
makes them assault. So, any responses to that?
Yeah. I would just say I can understand the hesitation. However, we have to realize that your child probably is thinking about this and has been exposed to it. So it's more important to get over that hurdle of uncomfortableness and open up that conversation in a way that is approachable, and then listen to what your child has to say.
And if they're not already thinking about it and aware of it, then it's almost even more important, because they need to
that is true.
understand that this is something that could happen.
That is true. But
Yeah.
given the climate today, with all the news that is breaking,
Sure.
I think it would be pretty uncommon for them not to be aware of something going on.
Sure. It's, everybody's talking. How can a parent tell, this is another question, how can a parent tell if their child is a victim of sexual assault? We actually just touched on that, but, rather than, asking directly, sometimes I think it's helpful to look for some red flags.
Yes.
And then if you are concerned, talking with people, maybe teachers, pediatricians who know your child, maybe coaches,
Yes.
and getting some more information before talking with your child. Is that true with sexual assault?
Yeah, I think it's always true to arm yourself with as much information as you can before you approach it. But look out for warning signs.
And what would those look like?
If your child all of a sudden seems more withdrawn or doesn't want to go to practice, of a certain sport, or just spends more time in his or her room and doesn't want to socialize, or just doesn't do the normal things that their routine is interrupted somehow.
Right. Okay, great. So looking for red flags and, then contacting people for help, maybe reaching out to organizations.
Yes.
For
tips, absolutely.
So Donna Palomba is from JaneDoeNoMore.org.
Yes.
And so that's a great resource for you, and they can help you out with any concerns that you may have. Also, if you know of people who could benefit from the information on our shows, Parenting from the Trenches, we would love to hear from you. Get your comments, get your questions if you have any, and make sure you can contact us through Facebook, Instagram. You can direct message us, Yellowbrick.me. And it looks like we may have some questions from...
The top one, you really kind of already addressed, but I don't know if you want to circle back and reiterate about that.
Okay, so how do you handle the comment, these women are just jumping on the bandwagon? This is from Sarah. Thank you for watching, Sarah. How do you handle the comment, these women are just jumping on the bandwagon and should have come forward when it happened? So you did talk a little bit about that, but that's, obviously very top of mind for some of our viewers.
It's so true. And I can understand stepping back from it. All of a sudden there's just all these women coming forward. And so a logical question may be, why now? Why did they wait so long? And I can tell you firsthand from meeting with so many
and you're
victims
a survivor
and
yourself.
I'm a survivor myself, that so many have come forward and said to me, even with all this going on, me too. but I can't come public with it for whatever reason, because of the stigmas that are associated with it, because their perpetrator is still around, because of fear, because of the self-blame that they have put on themselves, which was misdirected, but nonetheless the way they feel. And their strength in numbers. I think now that there's this groundswell, people are saying, you know what, I can come forward now. And it's so freeing to speak your truth. It is just so important.
And we have Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne, for watching. Says, we need to stop victim blaming. It's no mystery why most women don't come forward. I want to sign up for your self-defense class with my daughter. So go join them online.
Excellent. And they're free to participate.
Yeah, I've actually participated. It was fantastic. My daughter and I went, and it was a great experience for us. But back to your point, we don't know what's going on in somebody's life that may stop them. So it could be that it's being held over their head professionally. It could be something in their personal situation with their own relationship. So we don't even know why people, it's shame, it's hurt, it's trauma, So it does take time to come through. And I can think, of circumstances where people, don't come forward about, even smaller, less significant things at work, just because it's easier to let it go sometimes. Or you feel like it's easier.
You feel like it's easier
to let it go.
But honestly, Amy, what I want to say too is it's a trauma. When you are sexually assaulted or raped or a victim of child sexual abuse, there's neurologically something that happens. And so it's a trauma. And so you have to realize that a victim of that type of trauma is going to react in different ways, and it may not be their time. They may not just be able to, and the victim blaming that occurs when you do come forward, like in my case. It was devastating. So that's why I'm so passionate about what we do.
I know. It's important for people to understand that. And then we have one last question. So thank you, Sarah, also for joining us. Can you explain gaslighting, and this is in quotes, and how it works to undermine the victim? And I have to say, I don't know what gaslighting is.
Well,
except your actual lighting of the gas lamps.
Right. Well, I'm not quite sure, but I do know that predators have a way of grooming. And so you have to be cautious about the fact that, if it's especially with a child or a teen, these predators prey on vulnerable kids who may be a loner or what have you, and maybe, giving them gifts or taking them places where they'd like to go, or a special movie or what have you. So there's a lot of...
That's the pleasure too. So it's not just that they may experience sexual pleasure, but that a victim is coerced into it for maybe financial reasons or other comfort.
It's not violent. It's like, wow, I'm confused. This guy's so nice.
I'm benefiting from this.
Right.
Yeah, that is really tricky. And so it's important for kids to really be empowered and understand that they have to be able to separate that. Well, parents too, but
absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much for shedding light on an all-important and very timely topic.
Thank you for having me.
We're very grateful to have had you. Now you have, I'll just end on, you have a fundraiser coming up. You said it's a trunk show of jewelry.
Yes, Thursday at Onyx Jewelers in Watertown.
Okay.
And the event is from 6 to 9 that evening. But if you cannot come to the event, you actually can shop online at onyxjewelers.com. And anything that's purchased on site or that night, 20% of the proceeds benefit Jane Doe No More.
Oh, fantastic.
So
well, good luck. I hope that you raise lots of money for that.
You.
And we're just so grateful for the work that you do. Thank you
me.
for joining us. We're so grateful for your participation, and we really appreciate you guys. So keep following us. You're welcome to join our newsletter too, Yellowbrick.me. We would love to have you join us, and you can get information on future episodes and all the exciting stuff we're doing here. Take care. Have a great time, and we'll see you next month, December 20th, where we're talking about teenage girls.